Every year, the Recording Academy honors best recording of each Latin music category at the Latin Grammy Awards. As a member of all-female mariachi band Flor de Toloache, Sita Chay won a trophy at the 18th Latin Grammy Awards under the Best Ranchera Mariachi Music Album category. From jazz and classical music to gugak and Latin music. Let's meet Sita Chay, the first Korean musician to win the Latin Grammy Award on Heart to Heart. Joining us today is 최보람, Sita Chay, a Korean jazz violinist who won a Latin Grammy Award as a member of the New York-based Flor de Toloache, a group that plays mariachi, which is a uniquely musical sound. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to say hello to our viewers that are watching?
Sure. Hi, I'm really excited to be here as I'm a fan of Heart to Heart. I've watched so many of wonderful episodes here.
Well, thank you once again for joining us. I know that you're moving on a very busy schedule. First of all, I want to thank you also for your wonderful performance for opening up our show. Could you tell us about the piece that you just played for us?
Yes, I actually came up with a little melody this morning, just thinking about today's shooting. And I was thinking about how my journey that started from Korea and coming back here to tell a story, and the music was about that.
Okay, well that was wonderful. It was beautiful. We all enjoyed it in the studio. Thank you once again. So you are here in Korea, although I introduced you as a member of a New York-based group called Flor de Toloache. I had difficulty pronouncing the name, but first of all, I'd like to talk about how at the end of last year, the amazing news broke that you became the first Korean to win at the 18th Latin Grammy Awards. So could you maybe begin by telling us about the Latin Grammy Awards?
Sure. So every year, the Recording Academy of America celebrates all the recordings that was made prior year to that year, and that was made in Spanish and Portuguese and all the Aboriginal language of Latin America. So that's why our album was selected.
Yes, you must be so excited even till this day. It was great.
It's hard to believe sometimes.
Yeah, hard to believe.
Bueno, el Latin Grammy es para las caras lindas.
So you won the award as a member of Flor de Toloache. So could you also tell us about this group?
Yeah. Our group is very unique because we not only celebrate the tradition of Mexico, but also we infuse the new way of thinking about Latin music and Mexican music. And it's a mix of rock and blues and jazz and with the Mexican tradition, it makes a very unique sound.
So yeah, we're talking about many different kinds of genres,
Yeah.
musical genres. So the group is, as you mentioned, it's very unique, and it's especially unique in that its members are all women, female, and the members are, come from all different parts of the world. For example, Colombia, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, the U.S.,
Yeah.
from Korea, and there are many more from different places. So it's very refreshing to see an Asian actually join and play the sounds of Mexico, Mexico's traditional music. So I'm curious, how did you come to join this group in the first place?
By accident.
By accident?
My friend wanted to join, and at the time I didn't know what mariachi was. And I said yes, and it just happened to be a great hang, which is so important in music because you need to have great chemistry. And it was so refreshing to join all-female group because oftentimes in jazz and also in traditional classical orchestras have been mainly male-dominant. So
That's true. So as you said, you knew nothing about mariachi in the beginning.
yeah.
What left such a strong impression on you? What did you like so much about mariachi?
For me, it was the fact that we always ended up dancing while we were performing, and that drew the audience to get up and dance with us. And the mix of dance and music has been everywhere, and I really like the fact that it was celebrated in that way. And the fact that we all come from different backgrounds gave us a new horizon to expand and to play around with the tradition and kind of have both benefits of creativity.
I mean, we talked just before we actually started shooting for the show, and you did mention that you're very, very busy throughout the entire year. You perform almost every day, I think you said.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Since we're talking about musical genres and music, obviously we don't really have that many opportunities to, I guess, experience Mexican music. So I'm even quite, curious. What exactly is Mexican music? What are the features of Mexican music?
Traditional Mexican music are so diverse because they have over 30 states, and it's a huge country. So depending on the region, their way of playing music is different, and instruments that are used are different. But for mariachi, they have a big bass about this big that has like a back that looks like a turtle. It's called guitarrón, and the smaller version is called vihuela. And they also oftentimes have harp and a smaller harp so that they could carry it, and a violin, and trumpet and flute. Violin playing is so interesting because they choose to play more roughly.
Roughly
And,
meaning?
The sound is, compared to classical music, they don't make it refined on purpose because they are trying to portray something that's raw.
Oh, I see.
And so the technique a lot of times is the opposite of what I would do in classical. And the intonation, if you didn't know, you might think, oh, they're out of tune. But because they are not well tempered, meaning in classical, everything is very even and harmonizing nicely. But the fact that they use a little more attention, it creates a very unique color.
Okay.
So, and then also there is timing, which is depending on the region, they don't play everything in time to
is
this.
that true?
So it has this pull and feel that kind of makes you want to dance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. You've given us a great description, a great explanation of traditional Mexican music along with the instruments. But since we have your violin with us here in the studio, could you maybe play a little piece for us, play anything for us so that we could get a better understanding of traditional Mexican music?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is the way they would play in Mexico.
feel like I have to dance.
Yeah.
Get up and dance.
I want to. But if I were to play in more classical way, it would sound a little more like this. So it's a different kind of approaches. So.
Sita's amazing. She's a genius. No. And she plays mariachi in here in New York City with Flor de Toloache.
One of our all-time favorite violinists, really. She's an honor to be with
I
her.
call her a beast.
Yeah.
A musical beast.
Yes. Musical beast.
So we'll see you soon in Korea.
Bye, Korea.
Now let's talk about how you majored in classical violin. We do have your violin in front of us. I'm not a professional when it comes to violins especially, but when did you first start playing the violin, and also when did you, or why did you decide to transition from a classical violinist to a jazz violinist?
So my parents saw their friend's daughter playing cello, and they thought it would be nice to play the violin. But I continued to play the violin because I was around 6 years old, and before that I wanted to become a princess. But when you turn that old, you kind of realize, oh, I can't be a princess. But then, like, I would see violinists on TV wearing beautiful dress, and kind of like, okay, that might be as close as I can get as a princess. So I kept telling my parents I want to be a violinist, but it wasn't really about music or. I mean, frankly, I play both classical and jazz and Latin and different world music right now. But the reason I wanted to learn about jazz language and improvisation is because I was getting really serious about how composers wrote music in classical world, like Mozart, Bach, Prokofiev, and Chopin. Certain kinds of composition have very well thought out, revised kind of construction. But there are other kinds of classical music that really shows impromptu, the momentary kind of musical language, showing that all of those composers improvised, and also a lot of performers were expected to improvise. And I wanted to be a musician in a fuller sense. I wanted to be able to perform without having notes in front of me. So that drew me to jazz.
So in the beginning of our show, I introduced you as 최보람, also known as Sita Chay. Actually, it's your stage name. You go by your stage name. It's Sita Chay. So I'd like to ask you about the meaning of the name. What's the meaning behind the name, and why you chose this name?
So Sita is an Indian name or Hindu name. It literally means mother of earth. But beyond that, at the time, I was having a hard time because they kept misspelling my name as Borham, which means very different thing. And I was reading this vampire book before vampire was a trend. And this vampire was the only vampire left in the world who wanted to sacrifice herself to save the world. But because she lived for 5,000 years, she had connection to every country, and she spoke all the languages, and she had love for all of those cultures. So that made me want to be that person. And I also liked the fact that people couldn't quite guess where I was coming from when they heard Sita combined with Korean last name. And that prevented people from having certain kinds of prejudice from stereotypes.
I think it's a very nice name, Sita. Sounds nice. And it has a wonderful meaning as well. So now you've given performances on numerous stages, international stages as well. You've been actively involved in classical, as you mentioned, jazz, as well as world music, including Latin music, Korean folk music, Bulgarian dance music. I think there was also Indian raga.
Yeah.
Was there? Yeah. So is there a show or a stage that you remember particularly?
Yeah, there are a few. The recent one that I really, really enjoyed was when we were performing with Natalia Lafourcade a few days before the Latin Grammy. We drove to Anaheim, California to raise funds for Mexico. And we prepared certain kind of repertoire, and we also performed with Natalia. At the end of the show, she performed this beautiful music that was part of her album, and she just decided to invite us on a whim. And I did not know the song, and also I don't speak Spanish, so I was like trying to figure out what's going on as fast as possible while I'm performing. But it was such a moment that all the audiences were engaged, and we were dancing. We were having such a great time that reminded me why I am a musician.
I bet you loved every minute of it.
I really did.
Could you tell us in detail about the special project you're working on right now for 2018?
Sure. So I was originally inspired because of my close friend whose name is Teresa Lee. She's Korean American who was born in Brazil, and her background, which she didn't have a citizenship or a legal visa to stay in the United States, gave her this path where she became the first dreamer, meaning that right now the DREAM Act is a big policy that people are trying to pass. And the fact that she was an extremely talented pianist inspired her teacher to push for the DREAM Act.
Oh, wow.
And that passion changed millions of people's lives and will change those people's lives in the States. And she organized a lot of concerts to share stories. And that inspired me because I felt like musicians should create a music that tells a story, a specific story, not just random music. And the fact that I did so many folk music and it allowed me to connect with those people, I felt that people should benefit from it. So we mix Indian music with Colombian music, and because there are different kinds of music, but at the same time, there are so many common things between cultures because people are celebrating, people are reminiscing the pains they had in the history, and we can all relate to it, and we can all be sisters and brothers.
Yes.
So that's the new project.
After all, I guess, there are many, many music genres, but then again, if you think about it, it's just music.
Yeah.
You know, and music is something we can all connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hello, Sita. It's always a pleasure having you play violin for us here on Broadway, in Saigon and on the town, and many more to come, I hope.
You know, it was great to get to know her, and it's always nice when I go to see other shows and I see that she's playing there, and she's so talented and such a nice person that when I came to do Miss Saigon, it was nice to be able to work with her again. So congratulations to Sita.
not only a member of Flor de Toloache, you have been performing, you still perform and will continue to perform. And I'm aware that you are also the violinist for Broadway shows, solo violinist or violinist for many, many shows, and have collaborated with world-renowned artists. So could you please tell us about this as well? The Broadway shows you've performed on, as well as the artists you've collaborated with?
Yeah, they're all similar in one way, but they're all also very different as far as how you prepare for the performances. And Broadway shows are so much fun for me because they have a diverse repertoire of genres, because it's melted in one show, but you play Latin number, you play classical number, and there are dancers and actors doing all those things by memory right above you or near you, and interacting with that, knowing that there's another group of energy going on aside from your musical group. It adds to your performance. And because we're in the pit, we do a lot of fun things because we're not always seen. So
like what, such as?
We have our own choreography. We sometimes try to mimic the actors, and we sometimes play little games with each other. So it's a lot of fun. We get creative.
So now you also have a great deal of interest in gugak, Korean traditional music. So let's talk about you graduating from the Manhattan School of Music, and then you went on to study gugak at Seoul National University. You were the solo violinist for Kim Deok-soo's musical play, for his musical production. Now, Kim Deok-soo is, of course, a very well-known professional Korean traditional musician, known as the leader of samulori, which is a type of percussion music, Korean percussion music. So could you tell us about your past experiences, about when you studied, and about the projects or plans you have for activities or concerts or performances that are related to gugak, Korean traditional music?
So I first started also because I wanted to see my friends, and their mandatory class at Seoul National University was gugak class.
I see.
And I was drawn to it immediately because gugak had preserved what classical music had kind of lost, which was individual sound of vibratos and intonations, and I was amazed that they still cherished that and appreciated that. So it was in the beginning from my appreciation for classical, but it quickly made me realize that it's connected, and more and more I performed with them, I felt like it was a beauty that we need to share, because anything that is beautiful, I think our responsibility is to share with people. And I felt a little bit sad that I didn't know this before, and my friends back in New York didn't know it as well as the players here. So that led me to work with a lot of great musicians here and toured on Silk Road, and we collaborated with Mongolian musicians, Kazakhstan musicians, Uzbekistan, and learned so much about their music, which led me now to perform in New York and Korea and collaborate with those musicians. And now we are looking at our fourth Sanjo Festival in New York City with amazing musicians such as Itebek.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Okay, so you often, of course, although you are based in New York, you do come to Korea to, of course, perform with them, but they also come to New York to perform together. So you, definitely you're keeping yourself very, very busy. I'd like to thank you once again for joining us on the show, despite your very busy schedule, and best of luck to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.